Today we'll talk about vibe coding, and these are some tips and tools that once you've done some vibe coding, this is what I would suggest on making yourself more productive. Journey of vibe coding will still take a few months, but what you can do now, it's something that it's unimaginable for me that I can do actually myself in a few months. The reason why I still call it vibe coding in 2 words is because it is still coding even though you're coding in human natural language. Why I mentioned that is because even though it's way easier to code now, you still need to know how coding architects work. So I'm going to take you through a game that we recently built called King's Gambit, and this is what you can see on the screen. If you watch this for a couple of seconds, you can see a lot of animation, and I'll pause it for a second. There was a lot of animation on the screen, a lot of nice colors and details. To be honest, vibe coding to make a really good game still takes a lot of details and effort into every animation, every interaction. So if you just look at things like how it captures the sound and these like numbers updating, these are actually all coded prompt by prompt. So when you're building game like vibe coding, keep that in mind. To make a good game, you still need a lot of effort in terms of looking at every interaction. This is the end product, but how did I get here from 0 to 1, right? I think getting started is the hardest thing. I want to just talk about why it's so important to learn to code with AI. AI is improving at super speeds these days, and it's really important for you to pick it up now versus later. When you're vibe coding, the first thing you have to think about is like, which coding agent, which coding platform should I use? There are a few different options for those who are getting into it from 0 to 1. The easiest ones are platforms that actually does hosting. So what that means is you can prompt and you'll actually see a live product on the right or on the next screen. So products like Replit, Lovable, those are targeting that type of use case. My suggestions always go with something like Cursor. So Cursor, you can see here, this is Cursor. Cursor here is actually very similar to what professional developers actually use to program. It's what we call an IDE, so integrated development environment. The learning curve is slightly higher, but for you to get to a polished game, you'll need some tools that actual engineers will use. So I suggest things like Cursor, where you have actually a chat prompt on the right, and as you prompt, you see code being generated kind of in the middle and files on the left. So Cursor is a pretty good start with somewhat higher barrier to entry, but it'll get you further because it is very similar to a tool that professional engineers are using. I think the interesting thing about vibe coding is you can basically do anything as long as you keep asking AI, how do you do it? You just tell them, this is what you want to do. From my experience, it was very important to make sure you turn on like thinking mode. The thinking mode is really important because you want to see what AI is thinking. And as you see what AI is thinking and what they're writing in terms of code, you'll then learn better how they're actually building the whole architect of the game. And with that kind of knowledge, you'll soon get better and better at isolating where you should update, where you should prompt the updates for the game to look like what you want it to look like at the end. So the thinking mode is really important for learning. I think King's Gambit, once we had the concept down, actually vibe coding the first MVP might only take a week. And maybe in traditional gaming, it might take 10 engineers 1 month. Vibe coding is a lot faster, but I did say that once you have the concept. So building good games still require a really good plan in terms of what the game is about, why is it fun, how do you incentivize people to keep playing, why is there retention, what are new mechanics that you will release to users. So that part, there's no shortcut there. That's still something that you need to do in planning. But once you have the plan, getting that from plan to code or final product does probably take a few weeks or less. How I learned vibe coding, a lot of it is following what's trending on Twitter, X. I search a lot about Cursor. It wasn't particular any channels I was following, but I was following the vibe coding topics on Twitter and YouTube. Some tips on learning how to vibe code. If you have an end result you want to get to, it might not be wise to type that directly into your coding agent inside like Cursor or Lovable or Claude Code. What you might want to do is go to your general Chat GPT LLM and talk about it with that AI on like planning how do you do something. So you come up with a good prompt that's targeted to your coding agent. That's kind of how you go from like an idea to code. You probably definitely want to spend a lot of time chatting with like Chat GPT or Claude on how to build certain things. And then you take that prompt and put it into coding agent. That's kind of how I go from building new features. I don't go directly into the AI for inside Cursor or Claude. I probably use something like ChatGPT first. I think it's actually critical to learn basic software engineering architecture. What I mean by that is things like what is front end, what's back end, what's a database. Those concepts are still important today to properly vibe code. For example, if you want to make something in King's Gambit look different, like maybe you want the score to update every time you capture a piece. You can tell AI to do that, but it's probably wise to know that, hey, actually, the update of scoring is actually should be done in the back end, or should be done in the database, or is your user's information should it be stored in front end or database or another layer. So understanding these kind of high-level software architecture really helps you create more efficient products with AI. For coding agents, I'm using Claude Code and Cursor, and specifically inside Claude Code, it's using a very popular model called Opus 4.6. That's the latest one, and you want to actually spend money on the latest one because the latest models are dramatically better than models from like 3 months ago. You definitely should have a GitHub account. So this is where your code that you write on your computer gets stored in the cloud. GitHub is a really good way to not just store code, but also to then connect to other tools such as Supabase and Vercel. So Supabase is the database platform that is recommended for a lot of AI development. And then the last part that I use is Vercel. Vercel is also another tool that lets you host your actual product. So the code layer is stored in GitHub, and then a lot of data and database layer is stored in Supabase, and then it gets deployed to Vercel. So these 3 layers, if you use GitHub for all the logins, it'll actually synchronize. So these 3 things will make your AI more powerful as you're coding. Like anything in life, get started, sign up for things like Cursor, Lovable, Replit. So these 3 are all coding platforms or products, and just get your hands dirty. If you're stuck, ask AI like ChatGPT, Gemini, what do I do next? Because actually, that's how I learned to vibe code. It was not always through tutorials. It was actually through talking to AI, and it'll guide me to the next step. A polished game like King's Gambit really took a few months to create, but compared to traditional game development, we're actually saving years of work. Like a game like King's Gambit in a traditional environment will probably take, a dozen engineers, half to 1 year development. This game actually took me and another product manager, so neither of us are engineers, a total of 3-4 months to get to this state. You can check out the game at kingsgambit.fun or also search for King's Gambit on iOS and Android.